All right, Mike. Huh. So, Chuchinu, welcome to Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc, and welcome to the media event for this very first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. I'm Rissel Coy. I am the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School Squai Media Relations Specialist that you've been dealing with since May 27th. I just want to hold up this beautiful drum that was made by Norm Rataskett, who is a residential school survivor from the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School. I'm so honored that he crafted these. These will be gifted to our honored guest speakers today. And I just wanted to share that in this very drum, you see a reclamation of culture and helping the next generation connect. So it's a little bit different today because this is this day about truth and reconciliation. I have actually chosen to honor the day in more what is suitable to what I would wear in community. So we're going to start off today with Cookby Roseanne Casimir. We're going to then follow by our legal counsel to elaborate further on some of the important aspects that she's bringing forward today. And we are absolutely honored and delighted. And it was a very clear confirmation actually on the day of that she joined us for the first time as newly elected Assembly of First Nations Chief. Roseanne Archibald joining us today. She was determined to be here with us. And we're so delighted to welcome her back to Secwepemc Ulu. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Cookby Roseanne Archibald for some opening notes. While she's just getting settled, I'm just going to remind you of a couple of things. And that is that we're going to do the presentations first. We're then going to go to questions. It's going to be a hybrid of questions where we're going to take questions from here in presence at the Tk'emlúps Arbor and then go to online. We're going to have a microphone stand set up so that you go to that microphone stand. We ask that you not touch it for the COVID protocols. We thank everybody for being masked, and I thank every journalist for showing us your COVID-19 passports. Cooks Chacham, and with that we're going to go to, sorry.
Cookby Roseanne Casimir Winsquest, Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc. I'm very honored to be here today, and what a joy it is to welcome you to our community, the Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc within Secwepemc Ulu. So just imagine, in this very place, at the end of August, we were wrapping up our service as an emergency operations center for the wildfire evacuees. We are gathered in the Tk'emlúps Powwow Arbor, created as a special place to welcome and share and gather and have ceremonies. It is here where in a very few short hours, we will be welcoming Indian residential school survivors and intergenerational survivors. As an intergenerational survivor of Indian residential schools and as a chief who serves a First Nation where the past is truly remembered by the very big footprint of Indian residential school right within our community. Orange Shirt Day is important to our community. This past year, it is especially poignant as we brought forward the confirmation of unmarked graves of missing children from the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School. Our community continues to navigate the complexities of the impacts following the horrific findings of the Liskwai, the missing. We also knew that it was just the start of the story and that other residential schools would likely have similar findings, and they have. On this day of truth and reconciliation, let us focus on some of the truths. This past week has been a true testament of the journey that we have been on since May the 27th, filled with poignant as well as disturbing moments. On Friday, September the 24th, we were in the thick of filming two important projects. Earlier this summer, when our hopes to hold a gathering for September 30th was dashed by the need to reduce the contact due to COVID-19, the pandemic in which we're in. We were delighted in how the National Truth and Reconciliation leaned in to ensure that we had a virtual presence. We are honored to be a part of that national special broadcast. They also chose to uphold our vision to create a longer video where we could honor Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School survivors, the missing children in our care, and intergenerational survivors. We chose to honor them by demonstrating how, despite the concerted efforts of the federally mandated Indian residential schools to eradicate our culture, our language, and ways of being, we are reclaiming and revitalizing our Secwepemc language, traditions, and ways of knowing. We get to share our cultural treasures with the world that we're so proud of. The resulting video, Tk'emlúps, We Will Always Be Here, bears witness to the beauty of Secwepemc people, our language, the lands, and cultural expression. On the very same day that filming began, the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops issued a statement of apology to the Indigenous peoples of this land. In reviewing this apology, I had a very disturbing sense of déjà vu. Had we not seen this sort of statement before, as there was a sense of familiarity to it? The acknowledgments contained in the apology regarding the suffering and grave abuses caused by some members of the Roman Catholic community, and the legacy of suffering, and the challenges faced by us as Indigenous peoples to the very present day, are essentially a repeat of the apologies made to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. The apology contains no acts of contrition or living up the promises made by the Canadian Conference of the Catholic Bishops with regards to the disclosure of documents and information to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and of the raising of funds for Indian residential school survivors. Reconciliation requires truth. It requires truth and is but one milestone along with the restitution and potentially retribution in a path towards reconciliation. At the very least, steps towards reconciliation demands honesty and transparency. Tk'emlúps Secwepemc finds the apology's commitment to continue the work of providing documentation or records that will assist in the memorialization of those buried in unmarked graves. Cynical, in light of the ample opportunity the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops had to exert whatever authority they might have over the Catholic entities in which they preside, to provide those records and those documents. It is clear from Volume 4 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report, entitled Missing Children and Unmarked Burials, that the cynicism of the Church's commitments to provide all relevant documents is not misplaced. If this apology is truly a commitment, then Tk'emlúps Secwepemc insists on the complete and full production of all relevant documents and records in a manner and form that is useful and accessible to Indian residential school survivors to help identify those missing and those unmarked graves and repatriating those lost. Tk'emlúps Secwepemc calls upon the Canadian Catholic bishops to work toward the implementation of Truth and Reconciliation Call to Action number 58, which demands the Holy See to issue an apology to survivors, their families, and communities for the Roman Catholic Church's role in the spiritual, the cultural, the emotional, and the physical and sexual abuse of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children in the Catholic-run residential schools. Additionally, the Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc call upon the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops to use their full authority and moral suasion to work with the Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc, my council, and the community that we represent to assist in the full implementation of Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action number 71 through 76. Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc call upon the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops to work with us at TTS to implement any and all outstanding calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So let's talk about the records. So we know that the death registry for the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School lists only 15 deaths during its time in operation, while we have worked with both survivors and a remote sensing specialist to confirm at least 200 unmarked graves. And our work has only just begun. We are also aware of the fact that specific instances of death of children during the operation of the school were not taken seriously by civil authorities, including the police, prosecutions, and those with justice roles in British Columbia and in Canada. Records of deaths were not maintained by the federal government until after 1935. And we know some of these were destroyed by Canada and others. As a result, the families and the communities were not properly informed of the fate of the children who did not make it home. We know that many questions remain, and the work has not proceeded as called for by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Albeit that we have our laws, our practices, and approaches to the situation, these heart-wrenching circumstances is not of our making. This burial site came to be through the hands of those who ran the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School, the Roman Catholic Church. The next critical steps requires them to step up and assist us to the best of their ability to ensure matters are thoroughly and respectfully addressed. It is clear that Canada needs to lean in to assist too, as we will not complete this work without some clear assistance from Canada and accountability for document preservation and destruction must be given proper attention. Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc and the First Nations with Catholic residential schools have faced persistent problems in gaining the cooperation and support that we require to document and identify the missing and the deceased children. We believe this was caused or reinforced in part by Canada when the Attorney General agreed in 2015 to allow the Catholic entities to end the obligations under the 2006 class action settlement. While this minimized the financial obligations, it also ended some seriously needed reconciliation work. After 2015, we have been left without any mechanism to address these concerns locally or with all of the entities. Yet at the same time, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission left us a clear blueprint in those calls to action 71 through 76. Our researchers and community members do not have unfettered access to information necessary to identify and understand the full truth of the residential school experience within our territory. And we want Canada to share full documentation with us. We further expressed the importance that under international humanitarian and criminal law, there are domestic law responsibilities to investigate and to hold individuals to account when human rights violations occur. We believe this is one such situation of mass human rights violations, and we are concerned it might reflect criminal behavior, including suggesting violations of humanitarian law and genocide. As we work on the next steps to identify those in the unmarked graves and collect the information regarding the operation of the school, it will be important for all legal processes and normative considerations to be understood, including by our First Nation and the others from which children were taken. In closing, we extend our deep appreciation for all those that are standing in solidarity with us here at TTS. And it is time that we embrace our real collective history, recognizing the painful past shared by so many, and that we all continue on that path for real change for our future generations. This is more than a media story, and we need to ensure that justice and accountability happens in the long term, which means keeping pressure on our politicians and the church to do the right thing. Let us all lean in to be that hope of change in making a difference and to ensure that every child matters. Kukwestuk and Yekwestuk. Kukschachum, thank you and take care of yourselves. And we thank you and everyone for the outpouring of love, the prayers for our community, and the missing children in our care. Kukschachum.
Kukschachum, Cookby, Roseanne Casimir. We're going to now go to our legal counsel, Don Word, to elaborate a little bit more. Please note that we have posted the full media release on our website. It is also for those of you in Zoom. It is in the chat right now. So under tk'emlúps.ca in the newsroom is the full media release. So much of the areas that Cookby talked in was a meaty statement are also in there. So again, now to elaborate further, I call upon Don Worm, our legal counsel.
Thank you, Russell, and thank you, Cookby, Roseanne, for those very poignant observations and those remarks. I will not take up too much time, recognizing that we do have, as well, the National Chief here to offer her comments as well. But let me say, first of all, that I am deeply privileged and honored to be representing Tk'emlúps Secwepemc in performing their duty in this sacred work of identifying and hopefully repatriating those little ancestors that are buried not 100 yards from where we presently sit. This is a community that is intensely proud. This is a community that has built itself up, that has pulled itself up by the bootstraps, as Cookby Casimir has said, that they have, in spite of the federally mandated schools and the work that they did in there to eradicate First Nations people's culture, languages, and everything that has to do with who we are as a people, that they have failed. And the fact of the matter is that this community has been engaged in the last several decades in an intense process of revitalization, not just of their language, but of their culture and of their peoples. And the community that you see here is a testament to that very strength that they have within them. That strength is needed to go forward. That strength is needed, and the allies that you represent out there, that the non-Indigenous population represents, is needed in order for this sacred work to continue, not just for Tk'emlúps Secwepemc, but for all the First Nations out there who have lost children to this terrible, terrible catastrophe, this horrible social experiment gone so wrong. With respect to the records, we have heard time and again from Canada and from the churches repeatedly that they will go out of their way to provide the records. We have heard it again repeatedly from the Catholic Church, from the Oblates of Mary Immaculate who have operated this school, from the Sisters of St. Anne who had operated as part of as part of the overall process, operated the school and have engaged in the process of destruction of a community, a destruction of a people. We have heard their apologies before. We have seen them come forward and offer to provide their records. We do not accept those words anymore. Good words are not enough. We want action, and we will hold them to account for their words and for their promises. I am perhaps a little more skeptical because of my work with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the inaction that was part of the churches and the Canadian government's design. They did not fulfill their obligations to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to provide all the relevant documents. We cannot permit that to happen again. Cookpee Roseanne and her community and her council have indicated that they are prepared yet, in spite of these failed promises, to work with the churches. We will accept those promises, but they have to have some action behind them, positive action. And in the coming weeks and months, we will know whether or not those promises are more hollow promises or whether, in fact, we are really on our road to reconciliation. With respect to the apologies that was given by the Canadian Council of Catholic Bishops last Friday, yes, it rings hollow because we have heard it before. Cookpee Roseanne Casimir says that there's a familiarity to it. Of course there's a familiarity to it because the first of the apologies, which contained virtually the same words, was given in 1991. That's 30 years ago. They've had the opportunity to provide these records. They've had ample opportunity to do the right thing, and we call upon them now to follow up on those promises and to engage with this community and to finally do the right thing. And it isn't just the Catholic Church. It is other entities as well who operated these schools. And indeed, Canada has much to be responsible for. Canada needs to step up. They need to provide those records so that this sacred work can go. This sacred work can be completed so that those families that are out there that are still troubled, that are still horrified, that are still suffering, can be put at rest. So those communities who have lost their children can be put at rest. We need disclosure of all relevant records. And just to be clear, we do not need a document dump as some of the entities and some of the government departments have done in the past. We need them in a fashion that it is useful to the survivors. We need the finding aids that go with the mass archives that are available and that have not been disclosed. We can talk about more of this in the question and answers, but to be sure, we need Canada and the churches to step up and do the right thing. We are calling upon Canadians to assist in ensuring that your Catholic entities, for those of you that are Catholics, for those of you that are Christians, to call upon those entities to do the right thing. For all of you Canadians out there who are and have been troubled by what your government has done, we call upon you to insist that they do the right thing. I think with those words, I would pass it back. Thank you.
Cookschacham, very much to you, Don Worm, and I know he will be available here for question and answer. It is our absolute delight and honor and privilege to call upon National Chief Roseanne Archibald to bring some remarks.
Miigwech, Russell. Wachi Misway, Roseanne Archibald, Nitishnikassan, Dagotag Moshkata Kochian. Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to acknowledge the Creator, the world around us, and our place within it. I want to acknowledge the Tk'emlúps, Secwepemc traditional territory where we are here today. And I also want to acknowledge Tk'emlúps, Secwepemc, Cookpee Roseanne Casimir, her council, the community, as well as AFN BC Regional Chief Terry Teegee, who's going to be joining us today. Other chiefs who will also participate in the ceremony later, hereditary chiefs, knowledge keepers, matriarchs, dignitaries, and special guests. Beside me is a cedar hat that I was given by the Chehalis community when I visited them. So I'm going to wear it as I do the remainder of my speech to honor them and for the great honor that they've given me with this cedar hat. So most importantly, I would like to acknowledge the survivors like Rose Miller, who I met just a few moments ago, and all of the survivors of this, what I call institution of assimilation and genocide, also known as the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School. I also want to acknowledge the intergenerational trauma survivors who are joining us here in person, and all those survivors watching online, especially to our little ones who are buried here, and all of the little ones across Turtle Island who did not make it home. I do acknowledge the intergenerational trauma survivors because an Anishinaabe scholar named Dr. Pam Toulouse wrote that 100% of First Nations people suffer from intergenerational trauma. 100%. We are all survivors, and we are all doing our best to heal and walk forward with dignity. Today is Orange Shirt Day. Underneath all of these levels of sweaters that I have on is my orange shirt. But today is also the inaugural day of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So this is a day to honor the survivors, the intergenerational survivors, and the victims of these institutions of assimilation and genocide. I don't call them schools anymore because I attended many schools across Ontario and none of them had graveyards. So this is a day to reflect on the atrocities that Canada has committed against First Nations people and Indigenous people of Turtle Island. I've always said that truth must come before reconciliation. True reconciliation is about learning, sharing, and growing as a country. The more we know about where we've come from and our shared history and our responsibilities, the better we can address current challenges and find our healing path forward together. Here in Secwepemc territory, on these sacred lands, Canadians and the world first learned about the 215 innocent children who died and were buried here in unmarked graves. This is a crime against humanity, and it is a crime against those little children. The United Nations has called this genocide. We call this genocide. What is equally important is that these little ones were loved. They were cared for by their families and communities when they were forcibly removed, often by the RCMP and Indian agents. Certainly, it started with government policy, with the collusion of religious institutions such as the Catholic Church. This has been a very difficult week leading up to today. And I want to acknowledge that its survivors need support. They need to feel embraced. They need to feel loved. And it's important on this day that we are finding resources for them, because this is an agonizing exercise. And it's a grim reminder of this country's history. And we will actually continue to find and recover our little children in the coming years. We're at the beginning of this process. And so as we bring them home to rest in peace, we want to offer them proper ceremony. So for many Canadians and for people around the world, these recoveries of our children, buried, nameless, unmarked, lost and without ceremony are shocking, but not for us. We have known from the very beginning that many of our children did not make it home. The ones that did return told stories of horror and abuse. This has been happening since the inception of these institutions of assimilation and genocide. The policies from the 1800s continued for another century until 1996, when the last of the institutions was closed for good. This is not ancient history. Even after the institutions of assimilation and genocide closed, survivors and thousands of families continued to suffer. No one talked about the horrors that they witnessed. So children, grandchildren, and descendants are now coming to terms with the fallout. This has been a very difficult time for us as a nation, and we are reminded again about Canada's assimilation policies that have attempted to extinguish us as a people. Again, make no mistake, this is genocide. And I want to just say that many Canadians have expressed this shock and anger at the discoveries made here in these sacred lands, as well as Cowessess, Sioux Valley, Sunata, Penalacut, and elsewhere. For decades, we were not believed. But today, I once again want to acknowledge that Canadians, non-Indigenous Canadians, are empathetic and standing with us, more and more Canadians, and for that I'm grateful. I wanted to touch on the announcement of funding support from both the federal government and now the Catholic Church. This is a long overdue step in acknowledging the devastating harm that these institutions brought forth for many generations and how that legacy of harm continues today. But now is the time for accountability and action. As Cook Roseanne said, we need to see the proof that we are going to move forward with actions. Promises and empty promises and hollow apologies will no longer be accepted. I do welcome those commitments to funding, but I do ask that governments make sure that their funding is Indigenous-led, survivor-centric, and culturally safe. We must ensure that First Nations take the lead on all efforts to pursue justice and healing. The AFN is looking for further assurances that these funds, each and every dollar, will go directly to the healing initiatives for the survivors and the intergenerational trauma survivors. As National Chief, I will be reaching out to the bishops of Canada to ensure that First Nations are part of the development of what they are calling national principles and strategies, timelines, and the public communication, as stated in their announcement. Like I've said before, we're no longer accepting hollow apologies. Concrete actions and changed behaviors are essential as we walk the healing path forward. I ask all of our allies to stand with us, and I ask them to speak to their governments, to listen to First Nations and Indigenous leadership, not only today because it is the day of truth and reconciliation, but every day. We must build a future that is filled with love and caring for our current young ones and the ones to come. Every child deserves a loving, caring home where they are nurtured by their communities and families. I have a vision that I've often shared, and I know it's a common vision, that we will have healthy, happy children surrounded by the love and care of their families in safe and vibrant communities. So I want to say miigwech for being here today. I again ask our allies to call your MPs, your MLAs, your MPPs, and ensure that your governments fulfill the full TRC 94 calls to action, that they walk the path of truth and reconciliation, and that we walk this road together because we all want to heal. Our survivors want healing. Our communities want healing, and I know non-Indigenous Canadians want healing as well. Miigwech ninanaskamon gisakitin. Ninanaskamon in my language means I am grateful, I am thankful, I thank you, and gisakitin means I love you.
Tk'emlúps National Chief, for again joining us today in your profound remarks. At this time, we're going to go to questions. As I said, today is a hybrid, so we do have a microphone over here for people present. While we have a person from here coming to the microphone, we're going to take one question from online. And the first one we have is from Olivia Stefanovic from CBC for Cookbee. Can you provide an update on the search for unmarked graves and what happened to your invitation with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to visit the community today? Cookbee.
Thank you very much for that question. So we did extend 2 written invitations to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, to come and attend and also to visit our community. I understand, the federal election had occurred. I did hold out hope that he would be here today, and but I do know that moving forward, it's really important that, he truly uphold those 10 principles, the guiding principles of working with us as First Nations, and those underlying principles of true collaboration and that positive path forward, and that he truly does follow that. Extremely important. And, with the update in regards to our unmarked graves, we have done some more ground penetrating radar work, within some of our lands here, but we still have a long ways to go.
Cookbee, we'll go to the microphone here. Please proceed. Oh, just hold on. Let's make sure we can hear you. Yep.
Way of providing that documentation look like?
Just hold on. We just got to get your microphone out. Nope.
Yeah?
There you go.
Perhaps I can put it this way. When the TRC requested all relevant documents from the Government of Canada and the various Christian entities that operated the schools, this was not a demand of the TRC, to be clear. This was an obligation that was undertaken by those entities voluntarily in satisfaction of the 7 mass torts that were in existence at the time. Indian residential school students had launched across the country 7 class actions against the Government of Canada and the various church collaborators that had operated the schools. We had provided them, as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a description of what relevant documents means. We had provided them with an example of how they might be provided so that they would be useful to the TRC to be able to examine them. At the Library and Archives Canada, for example, there are what's called, and all archives for that matter, there are what's called finding aids. They are codes. They are codes and aids that describe the contents of the vast holdings. Library and Archives Canada contains millions upon millions of documents. The finding aids are a tool that are designed to assist archivists and researchers to locate records and understand them in the proper context. Without those, you cannot get to the essential research for the relevant documents. Those finding aids were not provided to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We were provided simple roadmaps, and often we were restricted in terms of how and when we were able to access those records, with the end result being that many of those records were not at all accessed. And so we could not provide beyond what we were able to do. And as reported in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final reports, only that evidence. You will know, for example, that Volume 4 consists of a full volume of the work that that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had undertaken to find the missing children and the unmarked graves. To that end, Canada had created a registry of named deaths and a registry of unnamed. A total of 1,201 named deaths at Indian Residential School, and an additional 3,201 unnamed deaths. Incidentally, those unnamed children who were buried were often not just buried without their names, but without their gender even being identified, or the location, so that their families never knew anything about this. We had no way to understand how the Indian residential school system dealt with deaths within the institutions, how they informed communities, if at all, how they informed families, if at all. That information was simply not there. One troubling fact that I would simply add to the issue of records, if I may, is that one of the largest databases that has never been disclosed is known as the SEDRE database, S-E-D-R-E. And the acronym stands for Single Action Dispute Resolution. There are complete records for over 100,000 students that attended Indian Residential School. It contains statements and historical records affecting those students. It has the applications for all of those students that had applied for the Common Experience payments. What is most troubling about this is that there is now judicial approval for the destruction of those records. Where in a civilized country, where in the civilized world do documents get destroyed with judicial authority? Where? That's what's troubling.
Thank you so much, Don Worm. We will take a question from Zoom, and then we'll go to the microphone. I see you, Tina, and you'll go next. So this is from Mike Hager of the Globe and Mail. And this might be a Don Worm question. I know that much of what is the steps ahead are done in concert and consultation with our lead technician on the legal side. Can Cookbee Casimir say whether the Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc are calling on the federal government to establish an independent public guardian to work with First Nations and be responsible for identifying and protecting these burials, and reflections upon Mary Ellen Terpelafon's call to prosecute anyone damaging these sites, if you support that or not, and include hiding documents about the existence of burials. I think we just had part of the question about hiding documents about existence of burials addressed, but we'll go back both first to Cookbee and then any follow-up comments from you, Don.
Okay, could you just repeat that one part of the question?
So that part was about the federal government is establishing an independent public guardian to work with the First Nations to be responsible for identifying and protecting these burials.
Excellent question. It's really extremely important to, have that protection and working and collaborating and, working with First Nations. Here at the Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc, we're very jurisdictional, with our lands here and the responsibility we take truly very seriously. First and foremost, it's about loving and honoring and respecting and, working on those steps, not only with our community, but also with the nation and everyone that's been impacted, have had children taken. So we have been working and having discussions in regards to the legal parameters. And I do know that most recently, with those discussions, a locateur, an interlocuteur was appointed. And they're going to be working with those processes and those legal steps, working with First Nations and working with the government as well. To me, that is something that is very crucial as we move forward. I know many of our members have stated, why is there no yellow tape here? Why is, this not taken seriously? Well, we are all taking it seriously, and we are grateful that there is that appointment, and that's going to be in collaboration with us as First Nations moving forward.
We'll go to microphone here live, Tina House.
Good morning, and thank you for
just
having
hold on.
us.
I can't hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, and good morning, and thank you for having us on your traditional territory. It's an honor to be here. Tina House with APTN National News. Cookpee Casimir, this is for you. Can you give us an update? We know that you're continuing the search here on your territory. Can you give us at all an update? Has there been any more unmarked graves found here to date?
To date, we have had more GPR work that was done. We have 160 acres that need to go through that full process. We know that just over 2 acres was initially done with our findings of the unmarked graves. And since then, we've done 2 other parcels, but we still have a long way to go yet. And there have been some artifacts that were found, and we're still awaiting the report to come forth to council.
Do we have an idea of when that might be?
We'll be sure to notify you because it's something that has public interest in it, so
Sure.
thank you.
Absolutely. Just one last question. Cookpee Casimir, do you want to take this moment again to appeal to the Pope for an official apology for what's happened to residential school survivors and their intergenerational families?
I would love to take that opportunity to, my hope is that the Pope does hear this message. We do want to see reconciliation. We do want to see a positive path forward, but we do want to see the calls to action followed through. We do want to have access to the records, and we ultimately want a meaningful apology, one where he truly does, hear our ancestors, our survivors and our intergenerational survivors, and that he takes that time to truly understand the trauma and the pain that it has caused, and to understand where we're at today. Then only can we truly move forward once those truths are truly accepted. And, my hope is that he does make that apology. I know there's going to be a delegation in December that will be going. But it would be more meaningful for him to be on the grounds within Canada and sharing that.
We'll take another question from the floor, and then we're going to have to wrap up. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. Oh, can you hear me? Mike Testio, Tk'emlúps this week. Just wanted to ask if there's been any family members of missing loved ones who've come forward since May 27th, saying that they think that their loved one attended Council Indian Residential School, and they're still missing, and if they think that they could be buried here.
Did you hear that?
Maybe repeat that. I think
Yeah.
with the wind.
With the wind?
I think you're also really close with the muffin.
Too close with the mic? Yeah, mask on. Shouldn't have done that. Yeah, just if any family members of missing loved ones who've come forward since May 27th, who say that their loved one's still missing and they attended Council Indian Residential School, and that they think they could be buried here at the 215 site. Still.
Thank you. We have Don waving his hand. So Don Worm, please, Mike.
I could at least speak to that in part. As you know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission held national events across the country during its tenure between 2009 and 2015. Two national events were held in British Columbia, one in Victoria and one in Vancouver. I can tell you that over the course of the mandate of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we heard from over 7,000 survivors. In the Vancouver and Victoria national events, we heard from hundreds upon hundreds of survivors, all of whom told stories of abuse and other types of misconduct, including deaths that they had witnessed during their time interned at residential schools, many of whom were from this community. We are accessing those records, which have been lodged with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation Commission, for the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. And we have a meeting upcoming with them in the next week or so to be able to start examining those records and then to be able to then essentially reverse engineer them, to look at those individuals particularly from this community that spoke to the loss of loved ones. We chose to go that route rather than to go directly to survivors and ask them to tell again of their abuses and the suffering that they've endured. We did not feel that to be trauma-informed. We did not feel that to be a proper way to approach this. And so this is the approach that we are taking. There are definitely individuals within this community that speak about the loss of their loved ones that could well be interred in those grounds just over there. And so we are approaching this with the kind of care that it deserves. We are approaching this in a trauma-informed manner that these survivors deserve and that this community deserves.
Thank you so very much, everybody, for participating today. Thank you for bearing with us in this wind and cold. I'm grateful that the wind is here to keep the rain away. That is a wrap. As we made mention, when there is upcoming developments, we will be sure to share them with you as we have done in the past. Make a note for Mike at Lee's Music if you're looking for the audio visual recording. And again, one more time to our three delegates participating today in this conference. Again, National Chief Cookby Roseanne Casimir and Don Worm, Cooks Chacham for joining us today and participating. Thank you. It's a wrap.